Well, thank you for joining us on the Anarchist Experience. My name is Robert Kruger. I'm your host. Today I have a guest with me, Michael Dano. He has been a guest on the Voluntary Virtues Roundtable, and he has his own show on the Voluntary Virtues Network. And why don't you tell us about your show before we get started?
Sure. My show runs every Monday night, 8 o'clock to 8:30 p.m. Eastern Time, and it's called Freedom Live, where every week I have a different guest on the show who is a voluntarist and a libertarian, someone who believes in freedom to some aspect, right? And we discuss whatever topic either is current or whatever topic my guest wants to discuss. And we'll spend about a half hour either introducing the guest, and then we go into talking about that topic.
Okay, well, I haven't had a chance to check out your show yet. Been so busy with getting the Voluntary Virtues Network going and doing my own shows as well. But I'll definitely have to take a look. Today we are going to discuss an article written by a friend of mine, Aaron Moritz, and it is titled "The Collective is Individuals: Bridging the Ideological Divide." Now, I will put a link to the article in the description, but for those who are viewing us live, if you would like to go ahead and take a look at it, it's at aaronmoritz.net. It's under the May 9th date. So if you go under there, you should be able to find the article that we're going to discuss during the show today. Also, if we have additional time, we'll go ahead and look at some memes that I've seen recently that we can debunk, and also we'll take a look at discussions that we've had with statists who are trying to poo-poo the idea of personal responsibility and liberty. So when it comes to the collective is individuals bridging the ideological divide, I understand what Aaron is trying to do as a general concept is he's trying to get us to realize that we're all not so different in our goals, in that we do want to have a world free of the violence and coercion of the government, for example, but the title certainly puts me on edge. A lot of times when you have somebody suggest that the collective is individuals, the idea is that if you do something that will benefit the whole and is a sacrifice to the individual, then it is by its nature a virtue or a virtuous act. And I disagree. Now he cites, for example, Snowden's actions, taking his own self-sacrifice to bring the collective into a better shape situation, because now we don't have to doubt some of the things that we worry about our government doing. We know that they're doing some bad things, so by taking that personal risk, he's helped the society as a whole. What do you think about that, Michael? Is that a fair assessment of his, self-sacrifice is benefiting the society?
Yeah, I totally agree. I think, well, first of all, a lot of people have a different viewpoints on Edward Snowden. Some people think he's a traitor. Other people think he's a hero. Everyone's got their own different opinions. I personally think he's a hero for what he did. It was definitely a self-sacrifice on his end in order to bring about something better for the rest of society. And he didn't really tell us what the tinfoil hat people didn't already know, is that the government is in fact spying on us. I think a lot of people understood that for some time, but I think he came out and he brought it to light. And what that did is it put his life in grave danger, which unfortunately caused him to flee the country and live in exile, so to speak. But he gave up a lot for himself. He had a huge salary. He had a family. So I think just the fact that he grew a conscience and said that what he was partaking in was wrong. I think that's what really makes him a hero, not just necessarily that he uh, told us this fact that the government's spying on us.
Well, I think that I have a different take on it. I think that Edward Snowden was acting in self-interest, and he was not acting in a selfless. It was not a selfless act to benefit the society as a whole. That he knew that there were going to be consequences for his actions. Yes, and those personal things that he may have valued may come under fire, like his family and his wealth. However, I think that he had a higher value on certain other subjective things that he chose to pursue instead of his own financial worth or his relationship with his wife and so on. I think that what happened is that he determined that the things that he valued as far as integrity and honesty were more important to him than those other things, and in so doing he fulfilled his self-interest by pursuing these attributes. He also probably knew that he would have some sort of historical result, that his name would be put into the annals of history and achieve some sort of fame and glory and notoriety in his action. I think that he also probably had some sort of indoctrination into the system that he worked in, where he believed in this collective called the government and placed it as being central to his life. And the purpose of that group was to benefit the American people. And so he internalized this idea that he is a representative of the American people, and then chose to subjectively value that as a high preference for his own life. I think that the unfortunate fact is that people will have subjective values that they will choose to go into and do that will benefit the society as a whole, that are based upon some of these collectivist thought processes. And perhaps Snowden may have even done so, but even then it was actually an individualist choice. The big thing is that this is where you start to get into really bad thinking. At some point in time in our history, it actually was a common thought process. There was a common idea, a common thing to discuss when it came to racial purity, that there were some that needed to have some sort of sexual restrictions on their ability to procreate. This is where actually the Planned Parenthood came from, and the idea that we should sterilize people who had certain ailments that they might pass on to their children, things of that nature. Eugenics is a selfless act, theoretically, if you have yourself sterilized so that you do not have your bad genes passed on to another. So if we are to say the collective is what we should seek, that we should benefit the collective even if we have to sacrifice, well, then there's nothing wrong with eugenics. Eugenics actually really does help the society as a whole. We know for a fact that it can, and it's wrong. It's absolutely wrong. So this thinking, it really bothers me. I don't care for it at all. Now, I do believe that the collective, meaning the group, the people that are around you, all the other people that you interact with, are benefited through the individual choices and actions that you take that are self-interested. For example, if I make improvements to my property so that I can have a more enjoyable experience living in my home, well, other people's property in the neighborhood actually does increase in value, because people like to be around other properties that are pretty, that are enjoyable. When I plant that tree and it grows to be this big, shade providing, shade providing tree, then when I sell my home, the next person who gets my home will have that experience, that wonderful, tree being there to provide shade for their family. So in my self-interest, I'm benefiting all these others around me. When I trade and so on, I'm creating an opportunity for someone else to better their situation. Did I go off on some off tangent there, or are you with me on that, Michael?
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I'm wondering, with your comments and views towards Snowden, could you relate any of that towards the actions of Bradley Manning?
Bradley Manning? I think Bradley Manning's nuts. That being said, I think that somebody, I don't know, his mindset being one where he changes his gender and so on.
Well, never mind that. I mean, I think what he did, he knew there would be consequences for what he did.
Yeah.
But would you say that he did it for himself, or do you think he did it to show the world that there are people that wear American flags on their sleeves that are going around there committing murder, cold-blooded murder?
I think that there was a distaste for him to see these things that he didn't approve of, and he was outraged, and that is what caused him to take his actions. Now, I mean, realistically, there are plenty of people out there who are interested in having sex change operations and so on, and they're likely to be perfectly legit and so on. I just happen to think that this particular guy was a bit whack. But bottom line is that yes, Bradley Manning. I think what happened is that he had a gut reaction to these types of activities, and his response was, I cannot bear seeing them anymore, so I have to do something about it. Even if it puts me into a cell, I then no longer have to see these things anymore. It may not have been a logical choice, it may not have been a rational choice, but it was certainly a choice that he was trying to espouse his own self-chosen preferences, and I think that by doing so, he certainly has helped reveal information that was very important to the society to be better. I think it's a good thing that he did what he did. I don't know. I think that in the case, let's say, for example, of a person who's outside of a burning building, who knows that there's somebody who is trapped within that building, and they run back in to try to save this person. I think that what happens there is that there is either an instinctual or a logical determination that I couldn't live with myself if I don't do anything. That I feel that my sense of what is right or wrong will be offended if I don't act. And so they act. Even if it is quote-unquote selfless, it's actually it's a selfish act to satisfy that I don't want to have this on my conscience problem. And I think that Bradley did that.
Right. Yeah, I think that's a topic that an objectivist would love to discuss. Because objectivism, unless you're sacrificing yourself for someone who is equal to your value, they don't see that as worthy of your own self-sacrifice. I think that would be a good topic to have Lauren Rumpler on to discuss.
Yeah. Well, I know that Ayn Rand was really against altruism. The reason that she believes that by placing other people higher than yourself in your own mind, you are subsuming a what makes you you. You're ceasing to be a valid human being. You're actually becoming a slave in a way. And I agree with her in so many ways that altruism as a rule is a bad concept. Altruism as an action based upon I don't want to see this crap happen because I don't like to see bad crap happen, and I will go through some suffering for doing whatever it is that I'm going to do. It's not altruism, actually. It's
Right.
it's subjective value, and the person is taking their own preference for not wanting to see this bad shit happen and placing it higher on their ranking system of what it is that they want to see.
hmm And I think that contributes a lot towards the suicide rate of soldiers coming back. We're looking at maybe 22 a day, and it's partly because of the psychotropic drugs given by the VA, but I think a lot of it comes from them being forced through orders to do something that they know is morally wrong, and they come back with a guilty conscience that they didn't do something about it. And now that they're out of the military, now all that's left is them reliving what they did wrong every day.
Yeah, yeah. Well, let's get into this article. Let's get into the meat of it. All right, so I get to the point where, after a little introduction, he says, the divide isn't that large, and the premise it depends on, which I believe is flawed, according to him, is this. What benefits the individual, more often than not, is at odds with what might benefit society. If this is not true, then no fundamental quarrel exists between the goals of these ostensibly embattled ideological frameworks. So theoretically, if the actions that benefit the individual aren't at odds with that which might benefit society, do we have a disagreement between the voluntarist and the anarcho-socialist or the anarchom? And I think that he's broken it down incorrectly. I think it's not the issue primarily, but we can certainly go ahead and take a look at it. Let's see. Are actions that benefit the individual at odds with what might benefit society as a rule? Obviously not. We know from examples that if I were to trade with someone else when I need water and they need food, and I have excess food and they have excess water, we're both better off.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, the society is better off because they have both of us not starving or dying of thirst, and we can contribute in some other way by, I don't know, telling stories or hanging out and having a good time at a party. So whatever it may be, we all do benefit the society by, encouraging self-interest in trade, for example. Now, the big issue, though, for self-interest is that it has to be done within a framework, within an understanding of what a lot of people call the non-aggression principle. I think the non-aggression principle is a little bit later in the theories and argumentation for anarcho-capitalism or voluntarism, but just as a general understanding, though, if we accept that we've already gotten that rule down, we know that the non-aggression principle is fine and dandy, then self-interest in actions that are to benefit the individual certainly do interact with others in a positive way and create prosperity for both parties and for all the other parties that are peripherally existing. There's a term, what is it called, where externalities, okay? The positive externalities of free trade, the positive externalities of self-interest are vast. Like I gave in the example of me planting a tree or doing home improvements, property values in my area also improve. If I go through the process of, let's say, self-beautification, if I were to lose some of my gut here and become more healthy, well, then I'm also reducing the amount of demand for resources that are basically lost cause type resources, like the resources that are put into keeping people healthy. So I'm not as much of a drain on those, reducing the price for everyone else. So this negative, this positive externality that occurs by me taking care of myself helps everyone else by lowering the prices for them. It may be marginal, but as a once it coalesces into a large number of people doing the same thing, we see that there is benefit for the society as a whole. So self-interested being healthy helps other people by lowering price. This is the, what is it called? Spontaneous order that occurs by self-interest actions. If I have self-interest in making something that really is impressive for other people, I provide people with motivation to create things that are also very impressive, to provide them the opportunity to experience whatever it is that I do. Let's say I make an amazing movie, for example. I've provided enjoyment and entertainment for other people, and I've also given other people ideas as far as how they can create additionally empowering movies. Creative thought will spread and provide benefits to others. And I'm doing that for my own self-interest because I want to see my vision created, and I want to either be popular or I want to have wealth. There's all these different selfish reasons that I do these things, but in any case, what would you say when he says, if we accept that what benefits the individual isn't at odds with what benefits society, is there no longer a fundamental quarrel between the voluntarism position and the collectivism position?
Well, I mean, I would pretty much say that I would agree with him in this article that humans are they're not an island unto themselves. I mean, I hold the belief that all individuals, they all act when they're within their own self-interest. But I think if the individuals involved, I think if they're making an exchange that's voluntary and it's agreed upon, I think it does benefit both parties. I mean, I think that's in general. I think that's like the best answer I can maybe give for that.
Okay. I don't know. I think that one of the problems that we see in the collectivist perspective or the communist perspective is the idea that they will say oftentimes that property is theft, or that we have such a thing as wage slavery, that there are conditions that the capitalist will ask for or seek that would be either, in their minds, the initiation of aggression or oppression in some fashion, like as if they kind of equate these types of situations to, if there's a person who is trapped in a well, and you've happened to chance upon them, and you see that they're starving and they're going to die if they don't receive some additional help, and you yell down to them, hey, if you don't do X, Y, and Z for me, I won't bring you food and water, and you're going to die. That's not what happens in an actual functional society where you've got, the ability to actually produce. You're not trapped in a well. There are opportunities for each and every single person to, provide for themselves if they so choose, whether that be working together with other people in a business environment, or becoming self-sufficient through their own labors on their own land, or by working together with other like-minded people in a commune, or if they would like to, I don't know, start their own business and become self-sufficient that way by getting providing a product or service that other people desire. So I think that there's a more fundamental gap than just the things that benefit the individual being what benefits society. I don't see it as being only that as being the difference.
I think one of the common things you'll hear from the ANCOMs and the AN socialists is when it comes to property. Like, you use the example, if you have an abundance of water and not enough food, and someone has an abundance of food and not enough water, they'll make the assumption that there'll always be a few groups of people that will gather up all the wealth, and they'll never share any of that wealth with other people. And to me, I don't think that's reality, because, like you said, I think there's a demand for every aspect, every job aspect you have. I mean, it kind of goes back to if everybody got a master's degree in college, there's always going to be a demand for those menial labor jobs. So the people that have all those resources, they're always going to be distributing those resources down, because obviously there is certain productions that need to get done in order to make society function.
Absolutely. There are a lot of misconceptions, and I guess all we can do is just explain that no, it doesn't work that way. You don't have this big overlord who can command everybody to do what they want because they've cornered the market on water. Quite frankly, water's really easy to come by if you know what the hell you're doing. So, maybe they'll say the corner of the knowledge, the knowledge market. Okay. Yeah, it's easy to fix that one. All you do is just converse with people and share ideas and thoughts, and they understand. All right, so moving on, I guess, to his next point. He wants to go through and explain what voluntarism is, and his explanation is that it's a position that no person has a right to force any other to do anything against their will, that all interactions involving multiple people must involve the uncoerced consent of all involved. This is closely tied to the non-aggression principle, a moral axiom that states that no person may ever initiate the use of force against another person. No, that's not what it says. Self-defense is permissible as the force was initiated in that case by the other. Okay. No, the non-aggression principle does not say that no person may ever initiate the use of force against another person. It doesn't. Not at all. It says that in the case where someone does initiate force, it is now legitimate to use force to prevent the initiation of that force or to seek redress for having had that force initiated. For example, if I break into someone's home in order to get food and water because I'm going to die if I don't, I certainly am. That's legitimately possible for me to do. I absolutely can do it. I still owed redress to the person for having done it, though. And they can use force to make me give them that redress. There's a difference.
Mm-hmm.
It is about legitimizing a specific form of violence and delegitimizing another form of violence. Now, it's certainly not a good thing that I would do that in certain respects, but it's an obvious choice. You have to take actions pragmatically in certain respects, and then you have to face the consequences of those pragmatic decisions in the future. But the non-aggression principle is definitely not about, this is illegitimate, not at all allowed. It's allowed. It's just that there are consequences related to it. So it's a big
deal. Yeah. I think there's gotta be a clear, definitive explanation between force and violence. I think a lot of people get those two mixed up, and they're quite different. Because violence, I mean, I can commit violence in the name of self-defense. I mean, but I think with the non-aggression principle, you can't initiate the violence. When you're self-defending yourself, it's not initiating anymore. I hold the belief that when you initiate violence against another person, whether it be trying to kill the person, trying to rob the person, you're basically, I think you're putting your life in that person's hand, and I think whatever use of force of violence that person uses against you in self-defense, I think is completely warranted. Well, I should actually take that back. If someone comes up to me and steals my book, just takes my book out of my hand and walks away, I don't have a right to shoot them in the back to get my book back. I would take steps to peacefully get that book back if that person turns around and pulls a knife on me to stop me from getting my book back, okay, then I have the right to escalate my level of violence to defend myself, because now it's no longer about that book.
I don't agree.
Okay.
I think that when a person initiates violence, in the case of theft, for example, they have illustrated a self-truth. They have demonstrated that their understanding of how things should go, what's legitimate, is that nobody owns property because they're taking somebody else's property. And so you can do the same to them. And that would include taking their book, taking their shirt, taking their hat, taking their shoes, taking every single thing that you would like to take from them, because they've legitimized it. They have said that I do not accept the principle of property ownership. Now, the severity or the response does not have to be minimized. It does not have to be in equivalent value, in equivalent I don't know, it doesn't have to be limited to such that it makes it parity or equal. What happens is they've established a principle by their actions, implicitly, giving consent to have anything that they own taken from them. The only way that they get out of that implicit contract is by making an explicit contract. And that explicit contract would be to get your retroactive consent to having taken the book. That you said, oh, actually, I'm fine with you having taken the book. We're okay. We're good. Because you gave me the book back, and you gave me another one of equal value that I liked, and you also paid for the process that it took to get you to do it. Maybe that is something that I would require in order to have that contract resolved, so that now we're equal. Okay, everything's good. But every person's actions are an illustration of what they consent to, what their rules of engagement are. That's the way I look at it. So yes, taking somebody's book, taking somebody's property, sure, you can actually just go ahead and shoot them in defense of your property in certain respects. Yeah, but there comes up these things that create incentives to not do that. Number one, you can't get redress from a corpse. Other than getting your book back, I don't know, let's say your book bag is now damaged. How are you going to get your book bag fixed? Well, you're going to have to pay for it yourself. Well, you could have had him pay for it in order to get that situation resolved and get your redress. So there's that, and then there's also going to be a societal norm that will make such an action less viable for you. People will likely ostracize you for having been such a overreactive person. Your insurance prices will certainly increase because the fact is that whatever damaged property that you had could not be offset by the committing, the offender. They could not pay for it. So when your insurance company pays to fix whatever, I don't know, let's say somebody broke into your home and stole your television and the television got damaged, your insurance company will probably pay to fix that stuff, but then because you killed the person who was responsible for it, the insurance company no longer has a way to get their money back, and so they will raise your premiums because you're taking actions that stop them from recouping their losses. So the price system, and whether it's prices in dollars and cents or prices in as far as social interaction, there are costs that are associated with these different actions, and that's where you'll see that repeat instances will create a incentive to have norms which use the minimum amount of force necessary to bring the situation to a non-dangerous one, and where redress can be achieved.
Right. Absolutely. I mean, yeah, I agree with you on that. Which I think it would, I think, the use of arbitration firms, like David Friedman talks about in Anarchy in Efficient Law, um, where if someone breaks into your house and takes your television, and you know who did it, you have cameras set up in your house, and the camera takes a snapshot of the person's face, and it gets forwarded to your insurance company, your arbitration firm, and they get in contact with him, and they say, look, we know you took his television. Please return it. We're currently in contact with your arbitration firm. We have all your pictures. We know that you have it. We would like for you to either return it or return it and pay a fee for your actions. I think, and in return, if the person's found guilty, then his premiums would obviously rise, and that would be another incentive for the people who want to steal things from people. It would be an incentive for them not to do it, because obviously they don't want to pay more to have these firms take care of their rights.
Yeah.
I think that would eliminate the whole, if someone steals my TV, I have a right to go to his door and shoot him to get that TV back.
Yeah, and we could go into the whole rabbit hole of whether what happens if somebody doesn't have an arbitration firm and so on.
Yeah.
Bottom line is that there are incentives to create positive activities, and yes, there will still be negative activities that will occur, but because of the incentive structures, you see less and less of them, and eventually you see them bred almost entirely out of the society through the idea that people stop benefiting so much from being able to do these things. Now, he continues on with it's hard to argue with that don't attack, don't steal, don't rape, don't kill. It's how hard how can you argue with that? He says that it calls into question the government, for example, because of taxes. Taxes are not voluntary; they're uncoerced. Oh, they are not voluntary, uncoerced payments for services rendered. We can't opt out. Yeah, that's right. We definitely agree there, I think.
Mm-hmm.
All right. And voluntarists point out that whether tax money is used for good or ill is irrelevant. It's required, acquired through force and therefore illegitimate. And he gives a pretty bad example, saying that stealing a sofa is okay because afterwards the owner decided that they were better off getting a new one. Yeah.
Yeah, that's stupid.
Yeah. So then he gives, I guess, kind of a straw man for the opposition's argument against us. I don't think I've seen exactly this kind of thing from other people, but maybe. He says, some see this position as akin to a belligerent child refusing to share his toys, stomping his foot and screaming, "It's mine." And maybe it is, but that has no bearing on whether or not the child has a point. Both the voluntarist and the child could be forced to share, the former at a point of a gun and the latter with the threat of a parent's wrath, but what can this force possibly foster besides resentment, a sense of injustice, and less intrinsic desire to share? I like his point there. I think that he's correct, but I don't know. I don't see a lot of ANCOMs or ANSOCs saying that we're belligerent children refusing to share our toys.
And that's certainly kind of what it sounds like. I understand what he's saying, but on the other hand, I don't think toddlers can fully grasp the whole concept of property rights. I mean, they can understand that what they have, was given to them, and they understand they like to play with it. But I don't think they understand the whole concept of voluntary interaction and you know what I'm saying.
Yeah. So I wish that he had more clinically addressed their particular criticism of anarcho-capitalism. because their positions are that um, by creating hierarchical structures, you have a position of authority and power, which leads to abuse, where people who are providing the job can tell the laborer to work in circumstances that are oppressive and abusive, that they can cause them to work hours that are just insane, things of that nature, because they are dependent upon the employer in order to have a way to live. They will starve to death if they don't have this job. This is a lot of the critiques that you'll see of voluntarists' positions from the ANCOMs and ANSOCs. That there will also be a wealth disparity that will be so huge and grotesque that you will see people starving and so on. Is another criticism that you'll see from them. Both of these criticisms are fallacious, but not necessarily fallacious, but they're wrong. In any case, this is not exactly a strong representation of the criticisms of anarcho-capitalism by the ANSOCs or ANCOMs. Would you agree that that's not exactly, you don't get that type of criticism, that they're like a child stomping their feet when you're dealing with an argument with an ANCOM or an ANSOC?
Yeah, no, I don't. I've never heard that kind of argument. I think the main argument I hear is that people are by nature selfish and greedy, and you can't just rely on people working on their own devices to just simply help everybody else out. I think, helping. I mean, the reason why people are poor in the first place, and there's such a poverty-stricken areas in the world, is where capitalism and free trade is really kind of non-existent, and there's really just a strong centralized government monopolizing that kind of use of force on the monetary system over there, and really just kind of holding people back. And I saw a quote from Cat Stevens, and he said something to the extent of eradicating poverty is the only way to achieve peace. I don't believe that. Voluntary, peaceful cooperation is the only way to really achieve peace.
Well, yeah, there will be some people who voluntarily want to be in poverty. There are people who have a religious tenet that suggests that they should be voluntarily impoverished. There are people who wish to, for some reason, experience poverty. I don't know what that is. It doesn't make sense to me, but hey, so be it. But it's certainly not. It's not a solution. It's a. When you start with your end goal being the solution, you got to have all the steps that get you there. And his idea is all fine and dandy, but you actually have to look at how do you get there. And I think the thing that ANCOMs and ANSOCs don't understand is that our understanding of economics, which is actually legitimate, explains how this works, and they just don't understand it to the level that we do. That in order to provide someone something like food, for example, to prevent starvation, you have to have enough food that you do not starve yourself by giving them that food. I don't stop starvation by giving somebody else my food and then starving. There's still starvation there. Wow. So what is necessary to have people see an end to poverty and to starvation is to have excess. You have to have excess in order to stop these things from happening. In order to give to other people, you must have it to give. And what produces more wealth and more prosperity is voluntary trade, voluntary specialization of labor, voluntary interactions that create cooperation and competition. It's basically team-based competition to see whose team is best at actually cooperating best and helping the most. That's what capitalism is. It's a competition to see who can cooperate the best and do the best for everybody. That's how it works. So then, is that kind of like a fair assessment? You think of what capitalism is? Is that it's a competition to see who can cooperate and provide the best, best stuff for the most, what other people consider worth the most, is what I suppose I should have said.
Yeah, totally agree.
Okay, so what do we go into? He goes into solidarity, trying to explain, I guess, the Occupy movement, what their underlying principle is, that solidarity is about, making sure that we take care of the others who are with us, who are part of our tribe, that we are responsible to help the community in times of need, those people who are in suffering, that we have a responsibility to take care of those. This is somewhat of a positive rights type of an argument, that we have a responsibility is not only just a responsibility but an obligation, and if you have an obligation, then you can be forced into providing it, and this is a tantamount in my mind to approving of slavery. That if we can show for a fact that if we don't have the services of this particular doctor, who's the only one that can provide those services, that we will see death. He has a responsibility, therefore an obligation, that can be forcibly put upon him to take care of those people who are in suffering. Instead of persuading him to do so, instead of offering him sufficient funds or whatever to help these people, we point the gun at him and use our whips, if necessary, to get him to do the job. Let's see. What is here? Okay. I guess he goes in. He's going into the idea that if we have survival anxiety, okay. All right, so biologically and logically, we cannot feel or be safe in a world that constantly stimulates this death anxiety through widespread financial and social insecurity. The unfortunate or unable, because no one has their back, live with chronic survival anxiety. The fortunate and able live in fear of losing what they have, either to thieves, beggars, governmental policies, or to shifts in the tides of the market. All right. You want to address this this concept of, if we are living in a society where we have death anxiety or fear of losing everything, how does the free market deal with these concepts?
Well, first of all, I think everyone has to understand in their own heads the concept of self-responsibility. I think this paragraph is really making the assumption that we're all just dumb, stupid animals. We're like kindergarten students that couldn't possibly figure out what to do with little Johnny harassing people with spitballs unless there was a teacher in the room. And I think that kind of mentality of that, I think the author might be projecting his own immaturity out to like the rest of the world.
Well, obviously, being a friend of mine, Aaron, it's maybe not your own choice, your own understanding of how you deal with the world or whatever, but you may have some past, involvement with other people, and you see that this type of thinking occurs and whatever. I would like to point out to Mike's idea that there was a scientific study, I don't remember what the name of it was, where they took cameras and they put them up around school children, and then when the teacher would leave the room, they would see how much of their activities were becoming cruel, abusive, fighting, things like that, and then they would also have a teacher in the room doing a variety of different activities, and they found that that one of the lowest amounts of bad acting occurred when the teacher was not in the room, and the kids actually got to interact with themselves and didn't have to have. What happens is that when there's a teacher in the room, a bad actor can act obnoxious and do something bad up to a certain threshold upon which the teacher will act. And if the person who is being the victim retaliates, then it's already gotten to the point where the teacher is just going to respond. And the bad actor who initiated the problem is often not as reprimanded or hurt or responded to by the teacher, and the kids know this, and so they know that if they don't have a teacher around and they start doing crap, that the teams will form, and then you'll get this gang war, and it sucks. So they don't do it as much. Obviously, that still happens, but it doesn't happen as much. In any case, I guess I take this a different way as far as like discussing what it is he's saying here as far as like this feeling or death anxiety through widespread financial and social insecurity. Well, yes, the social insecurity thing, that's kind of a tough one. You can't really deal with that one in so many ways, except by getting rid of institutions that normalize the concepts of abuse. The government is definitely one of them. By having children being forced to go to learn stuff they don't want to learn, that they're not interested in learning, being tied to a chair for, however many hours of a day per week, every single day of the week that they have to go in, that they don't want to, being forced by their government, or their parents are forced by the government and they're forced by their parents. They're being taught that aggression is the rule of the day. It's the might makes right rule, and then they start acting like jerks. So we're teaching our children bad habits through systems like government and so on. So as far as the socialized issue, being socially ostracized and so on, we're creating bad social habits. Obviously, there's going to be social ostracism that will occur because of the human condition, that sometimes you will find that a kid will grow up being kind of a dick, and he'll be able to persuade other people to be dicks, and so you got a bunch of dickish behavior. But you know what? It can be a lot less, and if you have a lot less of it, it actually is almost eliminated by that very fact, because you'll find that there are a lot of other people who are willing to support the victimization. The person who is being victimized, they will be supported by a community that actually defends against the dick. Now, as far as the financial insecurity, all right, when we look at throughout history, and we look at all the different societies that have existed, we've had a lot of examples of societies that had relatively free markets. In fact, we've had some that have actually had real free markets, just like what we're talking about. And in those societies, their productivity was huge. They were an incredibly prosperous society, and there was really no fear of near certain death, that their financial security was in danger. Okay, but let's just take a look at even some of the examples in modern times. The people of Singapore have almost unrestricted free markets, with the exception of drug use and the business of doing arbitration and policing, those types of things. But otherwise, they have an almost entirely free market. And look at what happened. This tiny little location just sprung up with just amazing amounts of wealth, tons and tons of shit that everybody has, and the lowest denominator that's there, the poorest of the poor, still can make tons and tons of money through the course of their lifetime, so much more so than any other society that also exists in our timeline. Let's say, for example, the communities that are communist, like the Amish. Now, maybe those aren't fair comparisons, because the Amish have a thing against technology, Mennonites and so on. Okay, then what about some of the other communes that exist in the United States and the UK and Australia, which there are several? Their prosperity that they've achieved in those locations is actually very, very limited. They don't grow very fast. They, in fact, have almost complete stagnation in these locations when it comes to wealth. So if you're living hand to mouth, where you are just getting by the seat of your pants, that every single week you have to make sure that you got enough food for the next week, and every next week you're doing the same thing and doing the same thing and doing the same thing. That's what the society that you're talking about, the commune, doing. They're fearful for the next harvest because of bad weather that might occur. Whereas in the capitalist society, you actually have just an amazing amount of abundance and stored wealth that occurs all the time. There's tons and tons and tons of money just sitting there ready to go into whatever it is that needs to be done, and it's fluid. It's more, people are more willing to just jump on board and start dealing with it, whatever the new problem happens to be, when you've got the funding to make it happen. And it just doesn't happen in these communes. Okay, so the free market actually resolves this by making wealth abundant, by making it so that anybody who wants to put their elbow grease, their hard work, their labor, their mind into these growth efforts can trade with other people and become profitable and become significantly more wealthy than they were before. Sure, there are going to be some people who are more wealthy, but in general, everyone is is better off and has more discretionary income that they can save for a rainy day, and thus, stave off this fear of financial insecurity. Would you agree that that we're, the financial security problem is more correctly addressed through a free market system than through a commune type system?
Absolutely, and an example of that would be the supermarkets. Where else are you going to find a greater display of voluntary interaction between multiple groups of people, total strangers, who are giving no guarantee that they're going to put a bite of food into your mouth? And nobody's dumb enough in this country. You hear the cliche arguments from statists, without government, how would you build the roads? How do we have schools? Nobody's dumb enough to say, well, without government, how would we have supermarkets?
Yeah, how would we get food?
Exactly, and you go into a supermarket, you see a really efficient, well-organized way of voluntarily exchanging goods and services, and it works.
Yeah, absolutely. But of course they're going to come back at us and say, well, that's because they're abusing the land that we have, and they're taking our animals and putting them through horrible conditions, and we're abusing the land and the animals and all this stuff in order to just get our our stuff in the grocery store. So how do you respond to to that criticism?
The criticism about how animals are abused, I would totally agree with that. But there is competitive options to that sort of thing. You could go with pure organic foods, but I mean, I don't want to get into the whole animal torture thing. I mean, it is a horrible thing, but to me, I think that's really like the Food Administration's kind of way of keeping the food prices down, and they put poisons in the food. They feed the animal poison. I mean, I think my answer to one solution to that would be, if you can hunt, hunt for your food. I mean, man's been hunting food for a million years, hunting deer and bear and whatnot, and a lot of people would be totally against it. That's inhumane and whatnot. Well, what do you think's more inhumane? Putting a cow or deer or whatever, some kind of animal, inside of a cage, and where the cattle driver beats the crap out of it and slices its throat and torches it before they take the meat out of it, or you just put one round through a deer's head and you get to eat for a couple weeks.
Yeah, the thing that I would say to it is a response is that, okay, here's what happens. You go through your subjective order of preference. The things that you value. Number one, the most important thing to you is, did I get to eat today? I don't know if that's the most important thing on your list. But you go down this list, and at some point, once you start to have wealth and prosperity, you're achieving all of these things easily. And you can satisfy the next one and the next one and the next one down your list. And one of those things that comes down on that list is, I want my food to be grown in a environmentally healthy way. and we start to satisfy that goal because it's something that people want to buy. Okay, same thing with the treatment of animals. You know, before we were just, oh my God, I'm hungry, and McDonald's can provide me a quarter pounder for $1. My hunger is now satisfied. Well, imagine if I've got $100,000 to my name and I'm earning an extra, you know, $40,000, $50,000 a year. What do I care that okay, fine, it's $1.50 now to make sure that this particular food comes from a source that is more humane and more caring about what it is that the animals go through. So it's about increasing the amount of wealth that is available so that we can actually start caring about that other shit. You know, when you are starving, you don't give a rat's ass about the poor treatment, you know, the poor conditions in which your animals that have to die to feed you go through. You can't afford it. If you you know, say, oh, well, I can't eat that. The poor animal's been mistreated, and you starve to death, you haven't done anybody any good. Okay? So by actually satisfying those needs in the priority system that we have, once you've satisfied them and you've actually made it easy to satisfy, then you can start satisfying the other needs and desires, like, you know, taking care of animals. All right, so I guess the thing that he wants to point out when we are critical of the collectivist people, you know, they may want to have this empathetic involvement and so on, you know, this tribal concept, solidarity thing, that he says, individualists will not agree, however, that solidarity can in any way be required. All right. It may seem nice, but a requirement will require enforcement. You can't force people to share or to do anything without violating the non-aggression principle. Is that our criticism of the idea of solidarity, the collectivist? You know, is that the norm criticism? Is that they're going to try to force us to share?
I think, you know, well, that's the ultimate outcome on their for what they're advocating, but I don't think that would be the reality of the outcome. You know, if I was to go to your door and say, hey, listen, I understand you have this, you know, this abundance of water, abundance of food. Yeah, I'm going to order you right now to disperse that among the rest of the neighborhood who doesn't have that. Okay, you just shut the door in my face, rightfully so. You know,
But then we pull out guns, right?
Exactly. Yeah, and then, whoa, well, what happens if someone pulls a gun on you and you don't have a gun and now you're forced to give it up? Whoa. Well, then that's not a very peaceful society that you're kind of advocating there.
So I would say that he's right on, that this is one of the major criticisms that we have of the collectivist viewpoint. It's not the only one, though. The other one would be that it's inefficient and doesn't get the job done. It actually produces scarcity instead of prosperity, unlike the free market, where you can have the end of these scarce things that you're worried about. You know, there's never been a collective, a society that has, you know, a socialist society or a communist society that has reduced scarcity like it is in a free market society. In a free market society, you can pretty much go to, you know, I mean, put yourself anywhere in the United States, for example. Put yourself there and just say, all right, how much would I have to do in order to get a package of ketchup or mustard or equal or sugar or salt or pepper or matches? Okay, pretty much anywhere in this country you can, you know, travel whatever distance it is to get to the nearest restaurant, sit down, order a coffee, and now you've got all this other stuff for free. You know, you can go to any place that sells cigarettes and you can get matches for free. You can go to a casino and get your matches for free, get your soda for free, get your water for free, get all of these different things for free just by being there. You don't actually have to play any of the games even at a casino to do that. So if you recall that there was a was a movie, I think it's called They Shoot Horses, Don't They? With Jane Fonda, and they were eating saltines and ketchup because the saltines and ketchup were free. Show me a communist society that has made that possible. Even though it sucks that they were, sustaining themselves with ketchup and crackers, it worked. It solved it. And then once you've actually had more and more wealth and more prosperity, all this other stuff becomes less and less expensive and more available and less scarce. So that's the other criticism is that it's lame. It doesn't work very well. It's poor economics to do collectivism. All right, so then he takes our lead with our response. He talks about tyrannical collectivism, saying that individuals tend to think that people should be responsible for solving their own problems. Okay. They often contrast themselves very broadly with statists who have a wish to have the state, i.e. government, men with guns who force people to do stuff, solve their problems for them. All right, so much modern socialist and collectivist practice has involved the use of state violence as a cheap surrogate for the tribal bond. Okay. I guess maybe we should address this tribal bond thing. Is a tribal bond realistic?
Well, define a tribal bond.
That you feel that there is, you have empathy for all the people within your tribe, in this particular group that you're a part of, that you're going to make sure that they don't have starvation, that they don't have poverty. Do you think that this is something that's viable, that you can have a population base like what we have on this planet be able to achieve this tribal bond, this empathy?
Well, I mean, of course, that's kind of hardwired in our DNA when it comes to your family, your immediate family. No one's going to allow their children to go hungry. No one's going to allow their children to go without a roof over their head or clothes on their body. I think that rule would hold different if it was multiple different strangers voluntarily living together. Because then I think it becomes, okay, well, what's good for me? What's good for my self-interest?
Yeah. He then, I guess, goes into, all right, well, the compulsory thing and top-down enforcement and so on. And then he quotes Joseph Campbell. He says, people have the notion of saving the world by shifting things around, changing the rules, and who's on top, and so forth. No, no. We're not on our journey to save the world, but to save ourselves. And he criticizes Campbell by saying this kind of rhetoric may not sit well with some. We should really just be aiming to save ourselves? ? It may sound a little too bit much like the selfishness praising mantras of Ayn Rand and the Objectivists. But keep in mind that to save yourself might not mean that you should put your immediate self-interest ahead of all other concerns. Well, I'm not an objectivist, and I'm not an Ayn Rand acolyte. I don't really care for a lot of Ayn Rand stuff. It's hard as hell to read. But when it comes to Ayn Rand and objectivists, I'm pretty sure that they don't say immediate self-interest. They say rational self-interest. And rational self-interest would put immediate self-interest in the back burner in a lot of cases. So I don't think it's a legitimate criticism of that. But then he says sometimes in order to save yourself, you may have to do the opposite. In order to save yourself, you may have to not save yourself. Is that something that?
That sounds kind of a little vague.
A little contradictory there.
Yeah.
So then he brings up the Edward Snowden example, which we've discussed. Let's see. He says that we don't invoke solidarity, but we want to make the world a better place for everyone. Do we want to make the world a better place for everyone?
I want to make. Well, I'm, yeah, that's. I mean, that's definitely something for me to ponder. I think everyone has their own. Even anarchists, I think they all have their different goals in life. I mean, I kind of view it like I want everybody else to be free, because if they're not free, I can't be free.
So when he says their ultimate goal is freedom for all, you agree with that?
Um, yeah. I mean, I want everybody else to be free, because if everyone else isn't free, which means that kind of implies they don't believe in their own heads that they're free, which means they don't want me to be free, and they're going to impose their violence by use of government on me.
Yeah.
So I guess my long goal, I mean, obviously it's going to take a long, long time. It'll be way past my lifetime and probably my grandkids' lifetime for 7 billion people on the planet to be free. But, I mean, I really want everyone else to be free by understanding that, government is not legitimate and that they own themselves mostly. And I think once a vast majority of people understand that, then they'll stop, committing violence against other people.
Yeah.
I hope I didn't go too far off track with that.
No. I guess the thing I would say to this is just that, no, I don't really give a rat's ass if everyone else is better off. That I want to see the world a better place for everyone. There are plenty of people who are out there that are dicks, that are assholes, that I don't want to see the world better off for them. I want to see the world less better for them. I want them to not experience the greatness that I hope to experience in my lifetime, or that others would. I want them to have the associated consequence of their actions, that they actually experience negative repercussions for being a dick. Okay? So, no, I don't want to have the world better for everyone. I would like for people to stop being dicks without getting away with it. I think that in the end, down, a lot of different subjective preferences in my list. Yeah, sure, the world better for everyone. Sure, that's all great. I like it. Higher up, ending oppression, ending tyranny, just getting rid of the mythology of the state and that it's necessary, stopping people from abusing their children. These types of things are far, far more important to me. Maybe at some point, yeah. But even then, there are plenty of people out there who are jerks that I don't. I want their lives to suffer. Actually, I want them to. I want them to suck a lemon. They're jerks. I don't want anything good, really good for them, other than them to stop being jerks. All right, so he asks what does work, and so then he starts going into destructive self-interest and the idea that the BP executives who made money in the time leading up to the oil spill, the environmental destruction that they caused was incalculable. Actually, it is calculable, but the cost to their company wasn't. Okay. I don't know, maybe LLC, limited liability corporation law had something to do with that. The fact that we have a monopoly on the provision of arbitration and, that kind of shit has prevented BP executives from experiencing the full brunt of what, punishment would be appropriate for their lack of protecting their actions from causing pollution. BP is a really bad example. It's regulated by the state. It's protected by the state. It's given preferential treatment by the state and made a cartel through the state. I wish people would just not use that in any shape or form when they're talking about free markets. It's so bad.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. And let's see. what would you say would be a really good example of a person taking their own self-interest, pursuing it, following the non-aggression principle, and not having a government, and then it also being a net negative for his heirs, his children, his family, his neighbors? You know, what type of activities can you think of where his own self-interest and self-satisfaction is going to cause hardships for others?
Well, I can think of one thing I can think of is like this. How about the CEOs of the big banks that went on during the '08 housing collapse?
Yeah, but
Um,
they had the government interfering with the prices of money and also giving them guarantees that they would bail them out if they made high risk investments and then lost. So they were incentivized to make high risks instead of making legitimate risks.
mhm.
They didn't have to pay for their own insurance against these risks coming, falling through. There was no actuarial table that could show them, hey, all right, this is actually, this is what we have to worry about as far as losses from these risks. So um, it's it was a totally tainted environment. I'll give you my best example that I can come up with for this type of thing. Let's say that you've got a person who is told that they are going to have a limited lifespan, that they're going to die in 6 months. They're a business owner. Now, because they're a business owner, they can sell off the business, they can sell off all of the equipment and so on, and their time preference is very high. That they want to sell things now and get whatever they can out of it, even though they're not going to get the most profit out of it money-wise. They're going to take a loss and move forward with the monies that they can get out of it in order to go on their spending binge to have fun, or to try to stave off their death. That they're going to waste all this money trying to beat a disease that we've studied for years and years and years, and we haven't actually had any success with. Well, in the case of the disease type of thing, maybe they actually do find a cure, and that benefits society. So that one's off the table. All right, so let's just assume that they're just going to go out and play fun, play and have fun, because they've got a very, very subjective time preference, very, very, got to have it now, satisfaction. In that case, they would cause their employees to suffer, they'd cause the investors to suffer, they would cause all of these different things to suffer. They would remove their whatever their business was doing from the market, which means that there is a missing component that could have been there, so now you have opportunity costs, there's all this loss. Okay, it happens. Somebody else is buying that stuff. And they're buying it with the purpose of what? Selling it again? No, they're going to actually try to use it to make profit, and they're going to have to use it in a way that is efficient. And so the new investor who's buying this stuff is going to seek the most efficient and most effective way to provide something. And they're going to try to find what it is that people want the most, because that's what they're willing to pay for the most. And so this destructive process of having businesses grow and grow and grow and then become obsolete and then disappear, whether it being obsolete from changes in the market, changes in time preference, whatever these reasons are, another business will come along and replace it. Creative destruction actually does help in the process. You have to get rid of some of the, like, who needs buggy whip manufacturers anymore? We don't need that. So yes, we do have these types of things that can happen, but it's resolved by the free market actually reallocating the losses. I think that what he's more worried about, though, is the environmentalist claim that what about the trees in the rainforest in Brazil? So what's your response to that one? I mean, they're clear cutting all these trees in Brazil. They're destroying the environment there. Why does the free market do that?
Well, the free market's not doing that. If you want a free market, the government will legalize hemp. and that'll do away with cutting down trees to make paper. Um, do away with paper altogether with internet, emails and whatnot. Or you can just refuse to do business with people who do that kind of business practice by cutting down trees.
Well, keep in mind the thing that's the most important is that the land itself where the trees are grown is owned by nobody. It's the government's land.
Mm-hmm.
And if it was owned by a person who is trying to make a profit, do you think that they're going to slash and burn their profits for all time by cutting all these trees down? No.
Right.
There are logging companies that own land right now that plant trees on a regular basis because they want longevity for their business. And it's not necessarily about their own personal interests because they have a corporate interest now. One of the things that's interesting about time preference is by creating societies where free markets provide the opportunity for investors to come together and create a joint venture with a lot of other people, like entrepreneurs, is that it creates a longer time preference for goods. And so you will see that they want to create sustainable growth. They want to have sustainable profits, not just a slash and burn kind of profit-based system. And it's the free market that does that, and it's capitalism that does that. It's not a commune-based type of thing. Now, I suppose that a commune could, yeah, absolutely try to set up a sustainable environment. In fact, they do that on a regular basis. It's one of their keystones. But it's actually one of the keystones of the free market as well. And a lot of people don't get that. They don't understand that it is not in the best interest of the corporate world to rip off everybody and take the money and run. They're going to be broke in, I don't know, let's say 2 years after they've been spending, living high on the hog in Las Vegas. Now what? They're screwed. So they try to actually make longevity happen, where they can continue to milk the people for whatever monies that they can by taking advantage of their needs by fulfilling them. This exploitation just has to stop, doesn't it?
Right. And you know who's really good at showing people how corporations and big businesses actually do invest their money back into jobs and the regular workers? Milton Friedman actually did that pretty well. And don't get me wrong, I'm not as big of a Milton Friedman fan as I am David. But there was a video that was put out probably in the 70s, and he was taking questions and answers from the audience, and this older woman stood up and talked about all the greed and that corporations have, that they hog all the wealth. And he says, well, okay, well, what do big businesses, what are some of the big things they invest in? And she says, well, oil. Okay, well, do they not invest in that oil and then invest it back into machines, businesses that make machines or operate with machines? Well, yeah. Okay, well, don't those machines provide jobs for those workers?
Yep, absolutely. And the thing that is critical to remember is that when it comes to the collective, we can see that there have been collectives and communes that have existed with relatively almost no government intervention, and they have done fine, just fine. They're not abusive, they're not coercive, they're not violent, and that's all fine and dandy. But they don't prosper. They don't create new wealth that just benefits everybody and raises up this society to a better new level. But there's also been societies that have been, communal, that have had hardships from environmental concerns that failed, and the population had to relocate or starve to death, okay, or change policies. Now, the same thing is true for societies that have been, in essence, anarcho-capitalist. Voluntarist societies have existed, and they prospered. They didn't just subside, they prospered. And with almost no exception, they didn't have the environmental problem where, you know, weather comes in and destroys their crops and they're screwed. No, they actually were prepared for those things because they had abundance and wealth to deal with those harsh circumstances. Now, with the proper, you know, pre-planning by the tribe, you could probably make sure that you don't have those types of problems in the future for a commune too, but just doesn't seem to happen that way. You know, foresight and preparedness and doing the extra work that it takes to put yourself ahead of the game just doesn't seem to happen when you don't have an incentive that you are going to benefit really a lot from doing such a thing. So then I guess he goes into this self-interested solidarity in the social good. This is after he's talking about an enlightened self-interest. Well, the Ayn Rand people would say, you know, it's actually what they're talking about, enlightened self-interest. But I guess you're talking about enlightened self-interest in a, like, magnanimous way or something. So he says, collective well-being can only be conceived of if it can be conceived of or determined at all in reference to individuals. No, I don't think so. What, you know, collectivist thought is what eugenics came from. It works that way. The individuals get fucked. Sorry. Maybe I should beep that. I don't know. All right, so all right, so then he goes into a lot of different, you know, if we live in a world with inept, starving, crippled individuals, they're going to steal from us and attack us. Okay, best way to get rid of that is to have prosperity, lots and lots of prosperity. Oh, okay, I guess he kind of agrees with that. He says this is why fostering individual productivity and self-mastery is so important, so that there's enough excess wealth to allow for compassion and kinship and to take care of those who can't. That's what we're talking about. That's what Anarcho-Capitalism does. That's what voluntarism does. So, yeah, okay, great. Solidarity in this sense is synonymous with self-interest? Okay. I guess in our understanding of the self-interest like we did before, maybe? I don't know.
It almost seems like as the article goes on, he's starting to question his own thought process.
Yeah, I guess. I don't know.
Or he's just playing devil's advocate for both sides. Who knows?
All right. Let's see. I remember there was a quote here where he was saying that that you can't have solidarity or you can't have value the good of the collective by sacrificing the individual. He says individuals are not expendable. That's not true at all. It's not true at all. Individuals are totally expendable in the collective. There's not a...
Totally, I agree.
Yeah.
Any entry-level position in a job, in a big business, you are expendable. You're a part of a collective. You're still an individual, but you know if you don't do, you know, they can get rid of you at any point. You know.
All right. All right, let's see. Well, let's just look at the conclusion. We'll wrap it up here because we got to get going. We're going to go over a little bit here. All right. What creates a strong community if not for autonomous, caring, empathetic, and free individuals? What supports the existence of these individuals if not a strong and caring community? I don't need to have a strong and caring community at all to be an autonomous, caring, empathetic, and free individual. Not at all. I have to have a non-violent, non-oppressive, non-tyrannical community. And within that community, I can make sub-communities that are of the people that are like-minded who would like to, work together. This team-based cooperation, that's what capitalism is. All right, so then... All right, let's see. So I want your response on this. All right, he says, it should lead to the counterintuitive coupling of realizations that often the best thing one can do for themselves is make their own immediate needs secondary, but that just as often the best thing one can do for society is to act in their own best interest and to take care of themselves first. What do you think?
I think
the second paragraph. It's the second paragraph under the conclusion, the second sentence.
Well, I love this. It really kind of just it makes me think, really. No, I think if every individual acts in their own self-interest voluntarily together, I think it will benefit society. I mean, I'm not really sure on the best response to this one.
Okay, well, let's see. I don't think it's counterintuitive that, yes, we can often see, we can see this happens all the time, that the best thing that you can do for yourself is to make your own immediate needs secondary. My immediate needs are that I have a, I don't know, a better phone than what I got. But then my time preference comes in, and I actually choose to wait because my contract hasn't run out, and so I need to wait for that to run out in order to get a discount on a phone. Okay. The immediacy thing is where you're double standard. You're making a straw man here for the objectivist position, the Randian position, and for anarcho-capitalists. Immediate needs for the individual are not what an individual makes his decisions based upon. He makes it based upon his subjective values and on time preference. And so by saving money in order to, start a business, they're creating more wealth for the society by becoming a contributor to the job market. They're helping get people jobs. They're creating a product or service that people are going to enjoy and benefit from. He's creating wealth when he does that, and he's doing so by sacrificing his own immediate, desires, because he's got a long-term, more important desire for himself at that time. So, yeah, really, just to stop with the immediate thing. It's bad. And then he says that just as often the best thing one can do for society is to act in their own best interest and to take care of themselves first. Well, if I don't burden other people by taking care of my own needs, it's probably a good thing, because there's opportunity cost when I don't. When I don't take care of my own shit, and I make other people take care of it for me, that stops them from doing all the other cool things that they could have done. So obviously, yes, taking care of your own self-interest, your own best interest, to take care of yourself, helps, because it gets rid of that opportunity cost. So I think that I like the idea of where he's coming from, but I think he's misrepresented both parties. That there are options that we need to explain to him that time preference is actually a thing in Austrian economics. It's actually a thing in anarcho-capitalism, that there are sometimes people will choose to delay their gratification for things in the future. There are times when people will choose to act in self-interest, which actually causes them their own on somebody else's subjective preference list loss, but to them they profit. So yeah, and it's rational self-interest. It's not just self-interest. So anyway, this is our evaluation, our discussion with the collective Is Individuals Bridging the Ideological Divide. I appreciate your efforts there, Aaron. Nice try, but I think that we need to talk about where it is that there's differences in what it is that people are saying, because I don't think that you've accurately represented the anarcho-socialist or anarcho-communist position, nor have you accurately demonstrated the position of the anarcho-capitalist. So if you'd like to discuss this further, certainly contact me. I'll be happy to discuss it with you. And if you are watching and have enjoyed the show, thank you for checking us out here at the Anarchist Experience. I have found some technological devices that will make it possible for us to take calls in the future, looking at doing that 2 weeks or maybe 3 weeks from today. And next week I will be doing a reanalysis of the Justicar's criticism of anarcho-capitalism, specifically addressing some of his videos. I will be doing that in a pre-recorded environment, because he's doing his in pre-recorded. He's writing down all of his things, so having the off-the-cuff kind of responses has created situations where I've said things that gives him opportunities to point out flaws, and obviously you can't be perfect when you're doing something live. And so doing it in a pre-recorded fashion, our next episode of the Anarchist Experience will be aired as a recording. So if you would like to check that out, certainly come by the Voluntary Virtues Network about a week from now, and that's when it'll be released. Thank you again for watching. Take care.